Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Three tails, Old Yin. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Two heads, one tail, young yin. Two tails, one head, young yang. The bottom trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as broken, broken, solid. This is the trigram. Gen, mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Gen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change, where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast. Late winter, approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. Our top or outer trigram will be read as broken, broken, solid. So once again, Gen mountain. This gives us the hexagram comprised of Gen mountain above Gen mountain, which gives us hexagram 52. Once our second line, which is an old yin, transforms to its opposite, young yang, it will give us a bottom or inner trigram for our supporting hexagram of broken, solid, solid. This is the trigram. Xun, wind or wood. Xun is both wind and living plants. Whatever penetrates, spreads, and grows, shaping itself to the space available or shaping that space to its own nature. She is responsive flexibility, sensitively improvising and adapting. Like the wind, she can always find a way through because she never creates any resistance. And so her influence is subtle and gradual, but far-reaching. In the family of trigrams, Xun is the eldest daughter, gentle and submissive. She belongs to the southeast and to late spring and early summer. Gen mountain above Xun, wind or wood, gives us the supporting hexagram. $18. We'll be getting the titles to our hexagrams from I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Doop-a-doo. Hexagram 52, Mountain. Nurturing energy by quietude. And a supporting hexagram 18, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, degeneration. Correcting degeneration by abandoning the false and returning to the true. We will start by reading from Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, which is a nice introductory I Ching commentary, which is also still quite profound often. Hexagram 52, our primary hexagram, Hilary Barrett calls stilling. I show this every time that I turn here, I believe. Is this the same thing? My daughter Finley drew that when she was younger. She's a much better artist now, not to say anything bad against that piece of art. Hexagram 52, stilling. Key questions. What if there were nothing you had to do now? What if there were nowhere else you had to be? What is your inner point of balance? Interesting. The picture in here almost looks like the Ice King. Oracle. When we approach the I Ching to consult the Oracle, the question we bring to it will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Oracle. Stilling your back, not grasping yourself, moving in your rooms, not seeing your people, not a mistake. To still yourself is to come to rest in your own right place. It's not the opposite of motion, but of being pushed into motion by outside influences. Whether you move or stop is determined inwardly by your sense of the nature of the time. Attaining this kind of stillness means firmly, even stubbornly, resisting the forces that would disrupt your equilibrium. Hold yourself still as if in meditation. Don't seek to grasp yourself by hunting down your every thought. You can no more make them stop by force of will than you can make your back still by holding it with your hands. Instead of twisting and spinning in circles trying to grasp yourself, keep still. In the same way, you can move freely in your rooms or the chambers of your mind, which can be just as crowded, and simply not see the other people there because you hold yourself still and do not resonate with them. Even if you feel as if you ought to be constantly sensitive to their presence and needs, in a time of stilling, it is no mistake to exclude all these things and be quiet within yourself. Image. Joined mountains, stilling. A noble one reflects and does not come forth from his situation. Whatever upheavals take place around it, the mountain is still. The noble one in his environment is like two mountains, joined together, present to one another, and not reacting. He is still inwardly and reflects. He is still outwardly, staying within his situation, not seeking to act on it or escape from it. Outer and inner stillness reinforce one another. Sequence. Stilling follows from hexagram 51, shock. Things cannot end with stirring up. Stop them. And so stilling follows, which means stopping. There's a natural alternation between change and stillness. And in human experience, a time of shock and reactions to reactions to reactions eventually needs to be stilled. change consolidated, and equilibrium restored. First the drum is struck, and the spreading vibrations set the whole drum head quivering. Then you bring your hand down to damp the vibrations and still the drum. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 18, corruption, is what Hilary Barrett calls it. It's an interesting little picture. Key questions. What is behind this trouble? What is the hidden cause? Oracle. Corruption, creating success from the source. Fruitful to cross the great river. Before the seed day, 3 days. After the seed day, 3 days. In ancient China, ancestors angered by neglect would send sickness and misfortune. This is corruption, something dark like a curse, lurking under the surface of life and manifesting as patterns of negative experience. We don't have to believe in angry ancestors to be haunted by corruption, whether we inherit its darkness from our past, our culture, or through our parents. When you receive hexagram 18, it is time to examine those old patterns at last, to seek out their source and give it due honor and attention. When you understand where your experience comes from, you can restore the creative flow and make a genuinely new beginning. You will need to commit yourself to the journey and take the risk of crossing the great river into unknown territory. And you will need to pay careful attention to the process. Before seed day, which marks the beginning of a new cycle of time, you'll need to identify the source of the corruption and prepare for change. Afterwards, you need to pay attention to the needs of the new growth. Each of these phases has only a modest duration. You're invited to attend and examine, but not to dwell on this change for a lifetime. Image. Below the mountain is the wind, corruption. A noble one rouses the people to nurture character. The mountain traps and limits the movement of the wind, making for stale, unhealthy air. An invisible corruption, poisoning from within. But a noble one transforms this picture. He stirs people up like the wind and nurtures their character like a sheltering mountain. This can work among people or within an individual. Inner movement and awakening transform limitation into a protective covering for growth. Sequence. Corruption follows from hexagram 17 following. Following people with joy means there are things to be done, and so corruption follows. Corruption means things to be done. Following is simply guided from moment to moment by the invisible currents beneath the surface of events. Eventually, the flow carries you to a place where there are things to be done, and it's time to interrogate the hidden causes and bring them into the light of day. Next, we will turn to our changing line 2 of our primary hexagram 52 mountain, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. And again, she calls it stilling, Hilary Barrett does. Changing line 2, stilling your calves, not rescuing your following, your heart not glad. Your calf muscles are just one connected part in a whole system of movement, so stilling them won't check your momentum altogether. It's as if you stop yourself moving forward, but you're standing on a moving surface. The whole situation is already underway, and this is stronger than your intention. You can't bring it to a complete stop, no matter how much you want to. Your heart is not glad. Your choice to be still does not give you true stillness. The direction of movement you're caught up in feels wrong, though it can't be helped. If only you had a firm place to stand. Next, we will turn to I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept and is quite alchemical in nature. Hexagram 52, Mountain. Stopping at the back, one does not have a body. Walking in the garden, one does not see a person. No fault. Explanation. Mountain represents stopping, stillness. In the body of the hexagram, one yang rests on top of two yins. The yang is above, the yin is below. Yang governs yin, and yin obeys yang, so the celestial is not damaged by the mundane. Inwardly still and outwardly still, one stops inside and also stops outside. Because one stillness pervades inside and outside, it is called mountain. This hexagram represents nurturing energy by quietude, discerning the good and holding fast to it. It follows on the previous hexagram, the cauldron. In the cauldron, one follows an initiatory process to produce illumination. Illumination comes from following the procedure. Illumination, reaching everywhere without becoming defective anywhere, refines the great elixir. But if you want to refine the great elixir, you cannot do so unless you discern the good and hold fast to it, staying in the proper place. Staying in the proper place does not mean empty inaction. The path has both action and stillness, and both action and stillness must stay in the proper place. In the qualities of the hexagram, the inner stopping means stillness staying in the proper place, and the outer stopping means action staying in the proper place. By stillness, you develop the abode of rest. By action, you test the abode of rest. By the former stopping, you reach the latter stopping. By the latter stopping, you master the former stopping. Action and stillness both end up in a single stillness. Stillness upon stillness, it is like the one stopping on the back of the other. Therefore, the text says, stopping at the back. Stopping on the back of stopping is acting from stillness, testing stillness with action. So action and stillness are one continuum. Then stillness does not become empty quietism, and action does not become unbridled indulgence. Action is none other than stillness. Stillness none other than action. Stillness is of course still. Action too is still. Inside and outside are one stillness, staying in the proper place without shifting. Therefore, one does not have a body. Walking in the garden, one does not see a person. Not having a body means there is no self. Walking in the garden, not seeing a person means there are no others. Ordinary people discriminate between self and others, inside and outside, because they have consciousness. When there is consciousness, there is self. When there is self, there are others. When there are self and others, one doesn't know where to stop. If one can stop at the back, then the consciousness of self and others sublimates. When there is no consciousness of self and others, then the human mentality leaves and the mind of Tao arrives. There is only one truth. Act and rest according to truth. In repose, you preserve correctness. Stillness is accomplished by realizing truth, not by the body. Resting in the proper place, inwardly, you are unaware of having a body. In action, you act correctly, acting on the truth, not in obedience to other people. Stopping in the proper place, outwardly, you do not mind other people. With no self or others, having been able to stop inside, you can also stop outside. Active or still according to the time, inwardly and outwardly in communion with the Tao, both action and stillness come forth from mindlessness. Through this one principle, all faults can be eliminated. If learners can apply their efforts to this double stilling, stopping in the proper place without wavering, then they will finish all tasks by this one attainment. Why worry that the gold elixir won't form or the great Tao will not be realized? We will also look at our supporting hexagram 18, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, the direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, degeneration. Correcting degeneration is greatly developmental. It is beneficial to cross great rivers, 3 days before the start, 3 days after the start. Explanation. Degeneration means deterioration. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is mountain, stopping, and below is wind, penetrating. It represents one yin entering and yang stopping it. Also, wind is inside stopping, representing stopping the yin so that it does not advance upward. It includes the meaning of correcting degeneration. This hexagram represents abandoning the false and returning to the true. It follows on the preceding hexagram, joy. Joy is harmonious action that would be improper so as to prevent Joy is harmonious action in accord with the time and in accord with truth, not acting in any way that would be improper so as to prevent degeneracy of action. When people are first born, they are utterly good, with no evil, integrated with natural principle. Originally, there is nothing to cultivate, nothing to realize. Since there is no defect, there is nothing to correct. But when they get to be 16 years old, yang peaks producing yin. By the development of habits, they become estranged from what is near by nature. This is like the one yin of wind arising below two yangs. As negative energy advances, the original being degenerates. However, before the celestial Tao has yin, it cannot be yang. Before human affairs have degeneration, they cannot be repaired. This is why the path of correction of degeneracy is valuable. The path of correction of degeneracy is like the one yang of mountains stopping on top of two yins, not injured by negative influences. Using this one yang to go back to the root and return to life is the study of working on the foundation, the fundamental. When the fundamental is established, the path develops. Once you recover your potential, it is like it was always there. This is attaining great development in degeneracy. Great development is not in degeneration, but in correcting degeneration. The way to correct degeneracy is not an empty tranquility without action. It is necessary to work in the midst of great danger and difficulty, to act in the dragon's pool and the tiger's lair. Only then can one restore one's original being, cultivating it into something indestructible. This is why degeneration is developmental, and it is beneficial to cross great rivers. Great rivers are most dangerous and hard to cross. If great rivers are crossed beneficially without injury, then places of little or no danger cannot harm. However, the benefit of crossing great rivers involves action and process from which no deviation can be admitted. 3 days before the start, 3 days after the start is the secret of the active process. The yin and yang in people is like the waning and waxing of the moon. In the first 3 nights of the moon's appearance, the yang light appears in the southwest. This is represented by the trigram thunder. On the night of the 15th, the moon appears in the east. This is represented by the trigram heaven. On the 13th, 14th, and 15th, the light becomes round. This is 3 days before the start. On the 16th, 17th, and 18th, the light starts to wane. This is 3 days after the start. When people's yang energy is pure, this is 3 days before the start. Once their yin energy has arisen, this is 3 days after the start. Before the start is yang, after the start is yin. This is the boundary of primordial and temporal yin and yang. People who practice the Tao need to know clearly whether things are degenerate or not. It is all in this need to know it is all in this boundary of before the start and after the start. When yang energy is about to become pure, ward off yin to preserve yang. After yin energy has arisen, repel yin to restore yang. If you ward off yin energy before it arises and repel yin energy after it arises, then the yang energy that has not degenerated can be preserved, and that which has degenerated can be restored. This is the real science of working on the fundamental, getting rid of falsehood and returning to reality. Correctness is unfailingly developmental. Development is unfailingly beneficial. We will now turn to our changing line 2 of our primary hexagram 52 mountain, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, at least here are some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements, and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Changing line 2 of hexagram 52 mountain. Stopping at the calves doesn't help out the following. The heart is unhappy. Explanation. Yielding, infirm, with stopping unstable, things get a bit further. This is like stopping at the calves. The calves do not move by themselves, they follow the feet. When you stop things, at the calves, it is because there is no one with firm understanding to help out. Therefore, the heart is unhappy. One cannot but stop. This is the stopping of the weak making forced effort. We will also look at the commentary section for each of our hexagrams, which is a little bit more alchemical, in my opinion. Hexagram 52 mountain. Mountain above, mountain below. Joining mountains, thus do superior people think without leaving their place. Mountains symbolize stability. With mountain above and below, one mountain joins another and so on, so that 1,000 mountains, 10,000 mountains present a single image of stability. What superior people see in this is that the inherent goodness in people is the place wherein people are human, where they should remain all their lives and never leave for a moment. Therefore, they emulate the image of joining mountains and think without leaving their place. In both social and spiritual life, investigating truth and distinguishing right from wrong, people cannot dispense with thought. But if the thought is right, then they are in their place, while if the thought is wrong, they are out of place. It is important that all thoughts stop in their proper place and do not lose their original reality. If practitioners of the Tao are able to think in their place, the mind of Tao is ever present and the human mentality is forever quiescent. No external objects can influence them, so there is no harm to thought. Do-nothing quietists may say they forget about things and forget about their own bodies, not thinking at all. But this has nothing to do with the Tao of nature and life of body and mind. This is also one form of being out of place. Being in place means being immutable, stabilized in the right way. Thought that is properly stabilized encompasses all reason and responds to all things. Though one thing all day, never being out of place, it is as though there were no thought. Indeed, when you know the One, all tasks are done. If you do not know the One, then thought is out of place. How many students in the world know the One? In our supporting hexagram 18, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, degeneration, mountain above, wind below. There is wind in the mountains, degeneration. Thus, superior people rouse the people and nurture virtue. Degeneration is when things fall apart. Above is mountain, below is wind. This is wind in the mountains. Mountains can nurture beings, wind can stir beings. Stirring up and nurturing is the image of repairing degeneration. What superior people see in this is that the vital spirit in humans is like the people, and the natural reality in humans is virtue. When there is degeneration in the natural reality, it is due to not knowing how to rouse the vital spirit to cultivate and nurture it. Therefore, they rouse the people of the vital spirit and nurture the virtue of natural reality. Rousing the people must be like the wind gradually rising from below, ascending from lowliness to the heights. Nurturing virtue must be like the stability of a mountain, as it nurtures beings, nurturing with richness and warmth. When one is able to nurture, the vital spirit becomes more and more active. When one is able to rouse, natural reality attains development. By rousing and nurturing, that which has not yet degenerated can be preserved, and that which has degenerated can be repaired. By gradual penetration, getting stronger with perseverance, one will eventually advance to the stage of ultimate good without evil, where there can be no degeneration. Next, we will look at James Dekorne's Gnostic Book of Changes, which I've left links to in the description box below. The time is now 4:44. I don't even know if you can see that. All right. In all seriousness, clearly. Hexagram 52. James Dekorne calls keeping still. Other titles might be, James Dekorne is a practitioner of the Tao himself, and he has synthesized several I Ching commentaries into one helpful location, which he has titled the Gnostic Book of Changes. He quotes things like the Kabbalah in here, or Carl Jung. Other titles might be Mountain, Keeping Still, the symbol of checking and stopping, desisting, stilling, stillness, stoppage, bound, reposing, resting, meditation, non-action, stopping, arresting movement. Makes me think of Four of Swords in the tarot. D.F. Hook refers to meditation and yoga. He also sums things up at the end in the notes and paraphrases section, which is super helpful. Judgment, leg. When his repose is like the back and he loses all consciousness of self, when he walks in his courtyard and does not see the people, there will be no error. Ritsuma/Karcher, bound, one's back, not catching one's individuality, moving one's chambers, not visualizing one's people without fault. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of confronting a boundary or obstacle. It emphasizes that stopping and acknowledging the limit, the action of bound, is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to stop. The image, leg. The image of one mountain atop another forms keeping still. The superior man, in accordance with this, does not allow his thoughts to go beyond the duties of his immediate circumstances. Wilhelm/Baines, mountains standing close together, the image of keeping still. Thus, the superior man does not permit his thoughts to go beyond his situation. Wu, one mountain overlapping another makes stoppage. Thus, the Junsi, or chief son or superior person, does not contemplate things beyond his position. Confucius said, if you do not hold an office, do not give counsels on its administration. What he meant is not to volunteer counsels freely. On the other hand, if you are requested, then give the best you can. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. Keeping still means stopping. One rests when it is time to rest, and acts when it is time to act. When action and rest occur at the proper times, one's behavior is enlightened. Keeping his back still, he rests in his proper place. The upper and lower lines of the hexagram all mirror each other, but are without any interaction. Hence it is said that he has no consciousness of ego. He does not see the persons in his courtyard, and there will be no error. Leg. 2 trigrams symbolizing mountain make up the hexagram of keeping still. Mountains rise up grandly from the surface of the earth, their huge masses resting on it in quiet and solemn majesty. They are bearers to the onward progress of the traveler, barriers rather. The attributes of this hexagram are both resting and arresting. It denotes the characteristic of resting in what is right in principle, right in the widest possible scale, in the absolute conception of the mind, and in every possible position in which a man can be placed. As in hexagram number 31, initiative, the symbolism is taken from the different parts of the human body. According to the Konghasi editors, the second sentence in the image should be translated, the superior man, in consequence with this, thinks anxiously how he shall not go beyond the duties of his position. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Wipe out imagination. Check desire. Extinguish appetite. Keep the ruling faculty in its own power. That was a quote from Marcus Aurelius. The superior man eliminates all distraction and concentrates on the matter at hand. A large portion of the work consists of nothing more than the will to keep still. Anyone who has ever tried it can attest that keeping still or doing nothing is probably the most difficult thing that a human can be asked to do. We are an ever-flowing fountain of restless desire. The senses are mindlessly programmed to encounter their objects, and when we prevent them from doing this, a great commotion occurs in the psyche. We are so accustomed to feeling our desires, drives, instincts, and appetites as integral to our awareness that we are seldom conscious of the fact that they are actually autonomous forces, as separate from the ego or choice-making complex as we are from other people, creatures, or objects in the physical world. Try controlling an ingrained habit, such as smoking, and observe how difficult it is to impose your will upon it. Who controls whom? A quote from Paracelsus in De Viribus Membrorum. The power of sight does not come from the eye, the power to hear does not come from the ear, nor the power to feel from the nerves, but it is the spirit of man that sees through the eye, and hears with the ear, and feels by means of the nerves. Wisdom and reason and thought are not contained in the brain, but they belong to the invisible and universal spirit which feels through the heart and thinks by means of the brain. All these powers are contained in the invisible universe and become manifest through material organs, and the material organs are their representatives and modify their mode of manifestation according to their material construction, because a perfect manifestation of power can only take place in a perfectly constructed organ, and if the organ is faulty, the manifestation will be imperfect, but not the original power defective. The ego has only one legitimate function, to make choices. It is the switchboard in the psyche which directs where the energy of the instinctual powers shall go. If these autonomous forces are stronger than the will of the ego, they soon learn to get their way as often as possible. The main difference between an inferior and a superior man is that the latter has learned to control and direct his energies for a higher purpose. One of the best ways to acquire this ability is to learn the lessons inherent within keeping still. A quote from Roberto Osseagoli in Psychosynthesis. Psychoanalysis has demonstrated that the power of these images and complexes lies chiefly in the fact that we are unconscious of them, that we do not recognize them as such. When they are unmasked, understood, and resolved into their elements, they often cease to obsess us. In any case, we are then much better able to defend ourselves against them. The lines of the upper and lower trigrams are mirror images of each other, yet not one of them has a proper correlate. They don't connect with each other. This suggests the separation of the senses from their objects. For example, eyeballs are sensory receptors designed for the perception of light and form. Close your eyes and they are prevented from contacting the phenomena they were created to perceive. That the psychic entities attached to this desire to perceive phenomena might resist restriction is a foregone conclusion, but the ego has control over the eyelids, or should have. Not seeing the people in one's own courtyard means that one ignores one's autonomous impulses. Regulation of the psyche's autonomous manifestations in accordance with the will of the self is for the purpose of gaining a controlling influence over one's karma. As stated herein many times, you, as ego, are nothing more than a tool created by the self for the direction of its own destiny. A quote from Robert Svoboda in Agora 3, The Law of Karma. Both karma theory and quantum mechanics refuse to accept that observers can exist independent of the systems they observe. Spiritual science goes so far as to take the observer's own internal universe and its states as its experimental field. For it is within that field that karma is produced and stored. The matter from which we and our obstructions are created includes both the dense physical material from which our bodies are built and the thoughts, attitudes, and emotions that make up our minds. Tantric practice is karmic engineering within this field of name and form, orchestration of substance and action into result. First, you direct new causes against previous effects to nullify adverse influences on your awareness. Then you unleash yet further actions to negate the influence of the nullifying actions. How any ego could tackle such responsibilities with any hope of progress is impossible to imagine without the direction of the self. Keeping still certainly has its own karmic consequences, but when the not choosing implied in this hexagram is done in accordance with the self's will and intent, the results slowly lead to ever higher levels of awareness, eventually into realms beyond the physical. That is what the work is all about. Any other choice is to lock ourselves into a continuous round of birth and death and physical manifestation. A quote from Rabbi David Cooper in God is a Verb. The Kabbalists teach that everything we do stirs up a corresponding energy in other realms of reality. Actions, words, or thoughts set up reverberations in the universe. The universe unfolds from moment to moment as a function of all the variables leading up to that moment. When we remain cognizant of this mystical system, we are careful about what we do, say, or even think, for we know that everything is interdependent. We know that a seemingly insignificant gesture could have weighty consequences. Suggestions for meditation. Notice that every line of this hexagram, except the last, deals with an inherent challenge involved in the discipline required to keep still. Compare the lines in keeping still with similar lines in hexagram 31, initiative. And next we will turn to our supporting hexagram 18, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. James Dekorne calls it repair. Other titles might be Work on What Has Been Spoiled, The Symbol of Destruction, Decay, Arresting of Decay, Work After Spoiling, Fixing, Rectifying, Corrupting, Branch, Degeneration, Misdeeds. A quote from D.F. Hook, can refer to heredity and psychological traits. Judgment leg. Successful progress is indicated for those who properly repair what has been spoiled. It is advantageous to cross the great stream. One should consider carefully the events 3 days before the turning point and the tasks remaining for 3 days afterward. Blowfold. Decay augurs sublime success and the advantage of crossing the great river, or sea, i.e. of going on a journey or of going forward with one's plans. What has happened once will surely happen again, literally 3 days before the commencement, 3 days after the commencement. It would have been hard to make sense of these words were it not that the Confucian commentary on the text clearly explains them, hence the liberty I have taken with the text. Lu, work after spoiling, great success. It is of benefit to cross the great water, before starting 3 days, after starting 3 days. This hexagram implies that although conditions are bad now, improvement can be expected. Ritsuma/Karcher, corrupting, spring growing, harvesting, wading the great river, before seed burst 3 days, after seed burst 3 days. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of disorder, perversion, and putrefaction. It emphasizes that letting things rot away so they become obsolete is the adequate way to handle it. Cleary 1, correcting degeneration is greatly developmental. It is beneficial to cross great rivers. 3 days before the start, 3 days after the start. The way to correct degeneracy is not an empty tranquility without action. It is necessary to work in the midst of great danger and difficulty, to act in the dragon's pool and the tiger's lair. Only then can one restore one's original being, cultivating it into something indestructible. The image leg. The image of wind below the mountain forms repair. The superior man, in accordance with this, stimulates the virtue of the people. Ritsuma/Karcher, below mountain possessing wind, corrupting. A Chunsu, or chief son or superior person, uses rousing the commoners to nurture actualizing Tao. Actualized Tao is the ability to follow the course traced by the ongoing process of the cosmos, linked with acquire, D, which is acquiring that which makes a being become what it is meant to be. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. The dynamic trigram is above and the magnetic trigram is below. Pliancy is below and stopping above. These suggest troubled conditions verging on ruin. But repair brings order to all under heaven, and he who advances will encounter the business to be done. The end of confusion is the beginning of order. Such is the procedure of heaven. Leg. Repair means the performance of painful but necessary duties. It shows a situation in which things are going to ruin, as if through poison or venomous worms. In order to justify the auspice of progress and success, the duty of the figure is to rectify this and restore conditions to health. This will require a major effort, such as crossing the great stream, and the careful differentiation of the causes of the problem, as well as the measures taken to fix it. The attribute of the lower trigram is pliancy, and the upper represents stoppage or arrest. Hence, the feeble pliancy of decadence is stopped cold by the immovable mountain. The 3 days before and after the turning point symbolize the careful attention and differentiation necessary for any rectification to succeed. On the image, Cheng Su says, when the wind encounters the mountain, it is driven back, and the things about are all scattered in disorder. Such is the emblem of the state denoted by repair. The nourishing of virtue appears especially in line 6. All other lines belong to the helping of the people. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Repair means to set your house in order. Analyze your choices before the renovation and evaluate their consequences afterward. The superior man orders his thoughts and feelings, reforms old attitudes, and strengthens his will. Psychologically, to stimulate the virtue of the people, Leg is to rectify the components of a complex. To imagine any truly objective state of perception, we must include all that exists, the entire cosmos. Each differentiation of this, from atom to galaxy, is one slice out of an infinite whole. As a portion of the entirety, We are always linked with our ancestors in an infinite web of relationships, which includes our family history, our racial, cultural, historical heritage, and Homo sapiens as a species. Though seldom aware of them, it is useful to remember these links. Emanating from an unfathomable complexity, their karmically charged morphogenetic fields are constantly shaping our lives. It follows that although we perceive ourselves as separate from our ancestors, the separation is a subjective experience which is true only in a temporally limited sense. Every line of repair except 2 and 6 shows a son dealing with the troubles caused by his father. This reminds us of the biblical curse in Exodus 25. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. The father archetype has a wide range of meanings. This extends from the primal spirit, God the Father, to a prior cause or intent in the psyche which has engendered a present condition. Psychologically interpreted, it is this latter reading which usually applies. If a father symbolizes the cause, then a son is the effect. If the effect is imperfect, then to rectify it is also to rectify the original intent. To a large extent, our lives consist of well-intentioned but misguided choices which create less than perfect consequences. To modify our attitude or behavior so that it corrects errors in our original intent is to deal with the troubles caused by the father. For example, in a misconceived expression of affection, a parent allows his child unrestricted access to candy. As a consequence of this choice, the kid's teeth become rotten, and the only logical way to correct the original error is to now curtail his intake of sugar. The fact that this new choice will create stress in the relationship between parent and child is just a consequence of the original choice and has no bearing at all on what is correct in the situation. In some situations, this hexagram may be interpreted as a response to a karmic chain of cause and effect. A quote from Erlene Cheney in The Mystery of Death and Dying. To harmonize with the wisdom teachings, the scripture should read that the karma of the father is visited upon the child under the 4th incarnation, not generation. The mistakes you made in the last 4 incarnations may be visited upon you in the form of karma, flowing out of the heart seed Adam in the present incarnation. Thus, what you fathered or created in your last incarnation may be the source or parent of your karma today. You are a child of that parent today. You have inherited from that parent the you of the past, not your physical parents, all of your characteristics, weaknesses, and strengths. The interpretation of any oracle response can only be as profound as our minds are prepared to accept. As moderns, we find it difficult to empathize with ancestor worship. Yet properly understood, it can provide useful insights into the work. In the unconscious realm, all time is immediate, not sequential, and the objective psyche consists of a non-temporal web of forces shading from personal to universal. This means that if we have a complex engendered in us by our father, for example, we can reasonably assume that he was passing on what he received from his own parents. In this way, the unresolved complexes of the ancestors shape our own personalities. They live in and through us right now, even if they had their birth in forefathers long forgotten. This is a kind of near immortality. Individuals may die, but beliefs, attitudes, complexes live as long as they have receptive vessels to inhabit. This is probably the engine of karma. To the extent that an ancestral chain of causality still motivates our choices, we are totally responsible for setting right what has been spoiled by the father. Suggestions for meditation. Most people have some level of unfinished business with their parents. Psychologists would have little to do if this weren't true. It can be a healing ritual to set up an altar to a deceased parent and meditate there on the stresses that still remain between you. To approach the situation without judgment, to realize non-logically that forces pre-existing you provoked the condition as much as your parent did, will elicit much insight. Be especially aware of the presence of the past and the illusion of linear time. Is it possible somehow to be your own great-grandfather? Ancestor worship of this sort can be profoundly therapeutic. We next will turn to our changing line 2 of hexagram 52 mountain, or stilling, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Keeping still is what he calls it. Hexagram 52, keeping still, changing line 2. Leg. The second line, magnetic, shows its subject keeping the calves of her legs at rest. She cannot help the subject of the line above, whom she follows, and is dissatisfied in her mind. Wilhelm/Baines. Keeping his calves still, he cannot rescue him whom he follows. His heart is not glad. Blofeld. Stilling the calves, his heart is sad because he is unable to save his followers. Perhaps the implication is that the mind's injunction to be still reached the calves, but was delayed there, so that the feet continued moving until it was too late. In other words, we are too late in deciding to stay where we are, although circumstances make this most desirable. Lu. Keeping the calves still, but he cannot restrain the movements that follow, and he is uneasy in his mind. A person cannot achieve his goal now. Wu. He rests the calves of his legs. He cannot help the one he follows and feels unhappy. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. He whom she follows will not retreat to listen to her. Wilhelm/Baines. Because this one does not turn toward him to listen to him. Blofeld. He cannot save them because he failed to retire and wait. Ritzema/Karcher. Not yet withdrawing from hearkening indeed. Cleary too. Not rising to follow means not retreating to listen. Wu. Because that person is unwilling to step back and listen to him. Leg. Above the toes are the calves, represented by the second line, which is magnetic, but in its proper place. Above this again are the loins, represented by the third line, dynamic and in danger of being violent. The second line follows the third and would like to help him, but is unable to do so because there is no correlation between them. The third line will persist in his course without heeding the warnings of line 2. Anthony. Keeping his calves still. When we allow ourselves to be lured by a wrong motive, it means we doubt that the correct way will work. When doubt pervades, we should not act. He cannot rescue him whom he follows. If our inner eye is fastened on what another person does, we follow their path rather than our own. We can only rescue them if we follow our own path. When they see that they are truly alone, with no one to rescue them, they will try to save themselves. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The man is unable to stop his stronger master, even when the latter is bent on the direction of wrongdoing. He is unhappy about being swept along by such a movement. Wing. You are swept along by your goals and the events you've set into motion. Even though you may wish to stop and reconsider, you cannot halt the flow of action. This condition brings unhappiness. Editor. The image depicts one bound to a force or situation which one either can't or won't control. Ritzema/Karcher translate hearkening in the Confucian commentary as Ting, the ideogram ear, and actualizing Tao, hear and obey. Perhaps you have disregarded your intuition or inner voice, the self. In some contexts, the image suggests one disempowered by circumstances not of one's own making. Little or nothing can be done to influence the situation. Quote from Epictetus. If you have given way to anger, be sure that over and above the evil involved therein, you have strengthened the habit and added fuel to the fire. If overcome by a temptation of the flesh, do not reckon it a single defeat, but that you have also strengthened your dissolute habits. Habits and faculties are necessarily affected by the corresponding acts. Those that were not there before spring up, the rest gain in strength and extent. James Dekorne breaks changing line 2 down into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A depicts a powerless relationship with a controlling inferior force. And B, fight hard against your need to act. Next, we will sum the reading up to the best of our ability with also getting a randomly card drawn verse from the Tao Te Ching. Our primary hexagram, 52 mountain, or stilling, or keeping still, shows the trigram mountain above that of the trigram mountain. So it's inner stillness along with outer stillness. And keeping still has action that springs out of it. And so it isn't only just keeping still. Action from stillness is itself a sort of stillness. So it's almost the idea of having an internal stillness that isn't influenced by thought or habit or being clever or the human mentality. Nothing like that. I believe the idea is that it rests on the principle of the sage or the self to focus all attention on the matter at hand, on just what's happening in the moment and not in the past or the future. So it's less influenced by mundane conditioning or intellectualism or the human mentality, and more so ready to have action spring out of stillness that is brought on by the will of the self. Our supporting hexagram, 18, is Degeneration, and it has the trigram wind below mountain. And mountain nurtures virtue, and wind stirs up the people. The people can be considered as autonomous impulses or forces within your psyche. And it stirs them up to virtue. So when there's something that is spoiling things, the action of repairing what has been spoiled is something that when the air is stagnant underneath a mountain, for instance, the wind whips it up and stirs things into motion in order to overcome stagnancy and degeneration. So it basically prompts us along to the part of it said that before seed day 3 days, after seed day 3 days, and the idea is that even though there has been like negative things developing for a certain period of time, correcting degeneration shows that we're about to break that cycle of things just getting worse, and that we can expect things to get better in the future. I do want to read what Hilary Barrett said. Was it Hilary Barrett that I wanted to read? I know that I wanted to read I-ming's section of that. But let's see. The mountain traps and limits the movement of the wind, making for stale, unhealthy air and invisible corruption poisoning from within. But a noble one transforms this picture. He stirs people up like the wind and nurtures their character like a sheltering mountain. This can work among people or within an individual. Inner movement and awakening transform limitation into a protective covering for growth. Following is the previous hexagram. And in the sequence it says, following is simply guided from moment to moment by the invisible currents beneath the surface of events. Eventually, the flow carries you to a place where there are things to be done, and it's time to interrogate the hidden causes and bring them into the light of day. And then I-ming's Taoist I Ching, he says about, in the commentary section about Hexagram 18, Degeneration. What superior people see in this is that the vital spirit in humans is like the people, and the natural reality in humans is virtue. When there is degeneration in the natural reality, it is due to not knowing how to rouse the vital spirit to cultivate and nurture it. Therefore, they rouse the people of the vital spirit and nurture the virtue of natural reality. Rousing the people must be like the wind, gradually rising from below, ascending from lowliness to the heights. Nurturing virtue must be like the stability of a mountain as it nurtures beings, nurturing with richness and warmth. When one is able to nurture, the vital spirit becomes more and more active. When one is able to rouse, natural reality attains development. By rousing and nurturing, that which has not yet degenerated can be preserved, and that which has degenerated can be repaired. By gradual penetration, getting stronger with perseverance, one will eventually advance to the stage of ultimate good without evil, where there can be no degeneration. And then our changing line, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. It shows someone trying to stop their calves, but they're unable to completely stop. So it says in James Dekorne's breaking down of this, it depicts a powerless relationship with a controlling inferior force, or fight hard against your need to act. And in the notes and paraphrases and the judgment, James Dekorne says, the superior man eliminates all distraction and concentrates on the matter at hand. And so it's almost like the meditative idea, or the Four of Swords in the tarot. In fact, one of the titles of this hexagram could even be meditation. Non-action, stopping, arresting movement. And D.F. Hook refers to meditation and yoga. The idea is that the goal was to stop, but with not being able to assist its next line, the third line, it basically is unhappy and is pulled along by previous events that are now impossible to stop. They may wish for events to stop leading to what they're leading to, but due to changing line 2, they're unable to do so. Anthony, keeping his calf still. When we allow ourselves to be lured by a wrong motive, it means we doubt that the correct way will work. When doubt pervades, we should not act. He cannot rescue him whom he follows. If our inner eye is fastened on what another person does, we follow their path rather than our own. We can only rescue them if we follow our own path. When they see that they are truly alone with no one to rescue them, they will try to save themselves. So, breaking things down a little bit further, mountain, our primary hexagram, shows stilling within and stilling without. And correct action can only come from that, where we don't have the influence of the past and the future and mundane conditioning controlling our direction and what steps we take. And then with degeneration, there's this idea that there's been in the past, a series of events that have unfolded to lead us to a place where there's work to be done. And the degeneration that we've inherited and contributed to through heredity, through the ancestors, through all the courses of events that have come before us, put us in a position now where things are still in a degenerate state, yet the goal is to whip the wind up and nurture and rouse the people to virtue. And that's the goal. And yet in our changing line, it shows that the calves cannot stop fully. They want to stop, but can't stop what's about to happen, which causes sadness, essentially, in the querent. Is that the word? The person asking the I Ching. So if we can keep still and not get pulled into the tide or the flow of past events, and in a way almost cut ourselves off from the past and the future and hold a space that honors the self, that would be a good place to be. And yet at the same time is a difficult thing to do, especially when we're caught up in mundane conditioning. In the Louis Ming's Taoist I Ching, in Hexagram 18, Degeneration, it talks about when people are young, there's nothing to correct. Everything is as it should be. And then when they become 16, mundane conditioning takes over affairs and they degenerate from there on. And so the goal is to, the reverse operation of the sage is to go back to the beginning and reverse the effects of mundane conditioning. So that would be the goal, but it seems as though in this particular circumstance that with changing line 2, the calves not being able to stop, it means that we're at a stage now where nothing can be done to stop certain events from birthing other situations that may not be desirable, but at this stage, time is flowing on, and maybe the message from our brain to our calves didn't relay all the way to the feet. Maybe it got hung up there in the calves, and the feet are just going to go anyway. So the karma, if you want to call it that, of the past comes and is causing things to advance as they were going before, regardless of how we desire that we may stop them at this stage. And yet there's always something that can be done by the superior man or the Chunsi or chief son or superior person or the sage. Even knowing the situation that we're in is helpful. And whether or not we can change the consequences now, seeing them from an outside perspective can help in the future at the very least, and also give us a different context for looking at things. It's like having your point of reference be solely from inside yourself instead of the idea of stilling where there is no self. I was talking about that. The only reason there's the idea of a self is because things aren't stilled. And when the self arises, the idea of the self, then others arise. And so you have this differentiation between yourself and others. But when you have stilling occur, then those things don't arise. And you, like it says, how many practitioners of the Tao know the one? in the interrelationship between everything in the cosmos, the past and the future, this is all like one. And in temporal situations, both location-wise and time-wise, there is, a difference. But everything is interconnected. And this web of relationship is something that we don't always see or think we have very much control of. I was thinking the other day of how to look at life in a way that was transformative, and that was feeling like an organism within a body almost, and so that your environment becomes something that is not external to you. And the difference between that kind of perspective and the perspective that has separation as something that's just a given, when, through science and various spiritual traditions, that's pretty much an illusion, the illusion of separation. With that, I would say that from the last reading that we got, it talked about separating things and knowing their distinctions is the first step in unifying things. And so it is kind of a natural part of things that it's to be that way. It even talked about with the person becoming 16, it says unless degeneration sets in, then you can't correct it. So it's almost like the first step that you see what's happening, and that empowers us to be able to correct it. And one of the things that I would say, especially based on this reading and others like it, correcting it would involve having a change of perspective and where that center of perspective is coming from, and whether or not we feel one or if we feel separate. If we're acting from the perspective of separation, things are going to go much more estranged and differently than if we relate to things in terms of them all being one, with us included, that we are an organism. The universe is an organism, that kind of an idea, and we are an integral, interrelated part of it. And though there be karma and things going on as before, having a different perspective about that and what it means to be interrelated, and kind of having your tuning fork start vibrating because of all the other tuning forks around, that is like maybe a good description of what could happen if more tuning forks were cleaned of dust. In Taoist terminology, dust is like external, the dust of mundane conditioning, the all the stuff that gets in the way of natural awareness. So if we can clean up our forks, our tuning forks, and let them all hum to the same reverberation of the universe, universal action will take place naturally, and we don't have to get in there with our cleverness and our human mentality and intellectualism to try and patch things up and be all clever about it, but that we naturally will have things develop as they should. I really like that Degeneration had in it the idea that even though things have been degenerating for a period of time because of that, before the seed day, 3 days, after the seed day, 3 days, the point of that was that things are about to go in a positive direction. We will read verse 15 of the Tao Te Ching, which my copy is by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. And wrap it up. The ancient masters were subtle, mysterious, profound, responsive. The depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Because it is unfathomable, all we can do is describe their appearance. Watchful, like men crossing a winter stream, alert, like men aware of danger, courteous, like visiting guests, yielding, like ice about to melt, simple, like uncarved blocks of wood, hollow, like caves, opaque, like muddy pools. Who can wait quietly while the mud settles? Who can remain still until the moment of action? Observers of the Tao do not seek fulfillment. Not seeking fulfillment, they are not swayed by desire for change.